Welcome to a recipe tutorial for Flourish Emporium. This is just a quick combination of actions showing you what some of the different combinations of actions from different sets can look like. This is a combination I do quite a bit in my editing. The reality is anytime I'm editing a photo for a client, I'm usually going to edit that photo in many different ways. I'm going to do color, I might do black and white, might do a vintage look, and so there's ways that I combine actions in order to get those looks. So for starters, the very first thing I always do is I run my essential color pop. So I'm going to begin by running that. And it does have this exposure adjustment step in it. I'm going to just maybe bring up my couple just a little bit here. And then I can mask everything else back because I think my background here is a little too bright. Obviously that would take some time, so I'm going to do my Trixie method, which is my layer mask here. I'm going to invert that by going Control-I. And now basically I have removed all of the editing I had already done, but that's fine. Now I'm going to bring it back. I'm just going to make sure that my foreground color is white, have my brush tool selected, 100% opacity, make sure it's a really nice soft brush with your hardness set to 0. And then I'm just going to come in here and just paint over them. And that's all I have to do here. You can see it's showing up in my mask here, and I'm just going to kind of paint over their hands. Let me make this a little bit bigger. I'm just going to kind of make this fast. And just create this mask. Now the action will preserve this mask, so I want to make sure that seeing how I have them here, that I actually kind of do a decent job of this, because this is my first mask that I will, and probably the only mask I'll make in this photo. So I do that. I'm just going to hit play and continue running this action. It's going to do its thing. It's going to load all these layers of stuff, and there the action is done running, and it looks really good. I may actually want to add a soft filter, which is also in my Essential Color Pop set. I like this soft filter quite a bit. It runs on your background layer, so make sure that's selected. Hit play. It's going to tell you it runs on the background layer. Make sure that's selected, and then it runs this soft filter. Now the problem is I don't want them to be soft. But hey, I already masked them out here, so I can then copy this mask down to this layer here. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to select this and then Alt-click drag, and that will copy it to the soft filter layer. Yes, you want to replace the layer mask. Now the problem is it did the opposite of what we wanted because it's showing what's in the mask. So I want them to be black and everything else to be white. The beauty, of course, is that I can then now invert the layer. So Control-I switches it back, and now everything else is blurry and they're not. Now I feel like the background is just a little too blurry maybe, so I can just slide the opacity of this a little bit and kind of tweak it to be exactly where I want it to be, like that. So I think that looks good. So I would probably save this at this point and say, here's version 1 for the client. But let's keep going. So I would then come back in. I think I like the sunflower I'm getting here. I get just a little tiny bit, but I think we could add more. I think I want a little more sunflower. So I'm going to add something for my flowers and sunburst set. I'm going to do sunflower landscape because this is a landscape photo. Click play. I'm just going to choose this one. I just want a little bit. What you just saw open up there is my palette. And the palette will open up sunflowers, it opens up textures, it just makes everything super easy. So now I can adjust this if I want to. I kind of like it. See how my original sunflower here? This is kind of mimicking that. Original sunflower is here. This is the added sunflower. I'm just going to click enter on my keyboard to apply that. So you can see there's the original sunflower, a little bit here, a little bit there. And now I just added in a little bit more to make the sunflower just a little bit more dramatic, and I like it like that. So I might save this as version 2 for the client, calling this, sunflower. Now from here, I think maybe I want to do a vintage look on this. I think vintage would work well for this. So I probably will run, I really like my cashmere vintage a lot for my tints and texture set. This is a really fun look here. Notice this little F6 here, and you're probably noticing also that I'm running these actions, and this is sort of a very typical sequence of events I would do in my editing for a client. And so I actually have these on hotkeys. The way you set a hotkey is you want to double click on the action name. Don't double click here on the actual text. That will just allow you to rename it. You don't want to just rename. You want to assign a hotkey. So if I click out here, this box pulls up, and now I can add a function key to this. I can have Shift, I can have Control plus the function key. And the nice thing with this is now if I want to run this action, I just hit F6 and it runs for me. And you can do the same thing with the Essential Color Pop. You can do the same thing with the soft filter we already ran. So instead of having to hunt, I just am going, F4, F5, F6, and running these different actions that I like to run. So in this case, I'm going to run my cashmere vintage, and it's just, I'm going to put it right here. You just want to choose a place in your layers here. So there's your cashmere vintage. It looks really good. Sometimes it can be a little bright when you run it with the color pop underneath. So I'm just going to kind of come in here. I'm going to turn off this brightness layer in the color pop, and I might slide this pop down just a little bit. But instead of starting over again, I'm just going to start right here. Okay, so this is another version that I would say for a client. I like it like this. I think this is a really fun look. But maybe I want to add a texture on top of everything else. So in order to do that, I'm going to run my Texture Palette Pro. This again will open up the texture palette. I think I'm going to have it not add a color. Well, let's try it with a color. We can always delete it out if we don't like it. Right play, notice it's on F4 as my hotkey. And this opens up the Texture Palette Pro. Now this is great because now I can access all these different folders of textures here if I want to. I can add in more if I want. I have all these different options. These are the textures that come in the palette. I'm going to choose one of these because I think these textures look good. I'm going to choose this one. It's just going to open it, it's going to resize it. It's also going to allow me the option to drop her a color. So I can choose a color that I want. I can drop it out of this, or I can just kind of make my own color, which I think is what I'm going to do. Choose that right there. Go OK. And now I can adjust the brightness of this. It's a little bright. I think it's my my tint up here that is kind of causing the problem, which happens sometimes. I'll bring that down a little bit. And I can also adjust the brightness of this here just by selecting that layer. So I can adjust the brightness of this and just kind of tweak it. Now I got texture on them, but if you remember way down here at the bottom, remember how I made this mask down here of them? It's still there. All of these run non-destructively, so it's not flattening or deleting anything as it goes. So I'm going to drag this up. Just Alt-click drag, and I'm going to drag it onto my texture layer to get rid of the texture on them. I want to replace the layer mask, and there you go. So this will be yet another version, I would say, for a client. It's very, very fast. In under 5 minutes, I have explained this all to you, as well as created 4 or 5 different versions of this photo for the client that they then have to choose from in the final printing or the final disc that is given to them. So this is just one recipe of different things that I do with my Flourish Emporium actions, and I hope you enjoyed it.